Hey guys, it's Josh, and welcome back to the Not So Bad Bachelor Pad, your favorite podcast for learning how to balance between being a raging dumpster fire and a functioning adult. And let's be honest, some days we're all a bit of a dumpster fire. Joining me this week inside the Bachelor Pad is a guest who I'm sure is going to wow you today. It is Kobe Folks. Kobe, thank you so much for making time for us today. Halfway around the world, but we're still able to connect. How you doing?
Yeah, g'day. Thank you for having me, Josh. Dialing in from Melbourne, Australia.
I don't know if you know this, but we have a pretty good pass with Melbourne. I think about like 25-30% of our guests have been from Melbourne, either
Oh,
born or
really?
like currently living there. So I was like, we
Wow.
got much love for that city.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're a little bit. If I was to try and align it with the city in the States, I guess we're kind of like San Fran, New York, whereas Sydney, which everyone knows, is kind of more like in Miami, LA.
Yeah.
But,
All right. I think you just rebranded that city down under. That's cool. Can you just tell us a little bit about your backstory? Are you born and bred from Melbourne, or how'd you end up there?
no. So I guess a little bit about me for your audience. I'm an OnlyFans content creator, sort of entrepreneur, I guess, running my own business now, and I would say maybe a therapist sometimes for confused horny blokes. But I wasn't always like that. I've been in Melbourne for 2 years. I actually grew up in outback Queensland, so sort of out, which is a state, so outback Australia. And I moved to Tasmania during my younger years or during high school to farmland. So it's a bit like I would say going from Texas to the Midwest. You're in Nashville. I'm sure you can probably relate, but I lived out in farming land. I did a bit of a stint around Australia, living in Melbourne and Sydney in my 20s. And now I've found myself back in Melbourne. I'm nearly 40, so I've been here for 3 years now. And yeah, pretty much doing OnlyFans content. I do work full time as well, so I kind of balance the two. But yeah, it's been an interesting 5 years.
I mean, talk about a boomerang, you know. We rarely think that we'll ever backtrack or return somewhere, but it's funny how life just has that kind of plan for us that sometimes you're like, okay, I've done everything I can in this city and then I'm going to go somewhere else. Next thing you know, you're right back there.
Oh yeah, and Melbourne's changed a lot. I was here when my early 20s. 20 years later, I'm back here, and the city is just growing massively. It's about 6 million people now, so it's actually Australia's biggest city from a population standpoint. It's bigger than Sydney.
I mean, that's a boom right there. I could imagine how 20-year-old Kobe would have reacted to Melbourne as it is now opposed to
Yeah,
a few
very
years ago.
differently. When I first moved to Melbourne, I wasn't out. Now I come back and I'm like at the other polar opposite end.
It's a whole different city at this point, it's a whole different city. Obviously, name of the show, Not So Bad Bachelor Pad. I got to start the show off with asking, what's your current relationship status? Single, taken, just trying to figure anything out?
Complicated. That famous Facebook status update. So I met my partner Sam Brownell, who's my ex now, about 6 years ago. We started OnlyFans together a year into our relationship. Recently, we did separate on good terms. We're still business partners. Sort of seeing somebody else. They're not out at the moment, but it's not fully, I guess, formed because they're not out. They're a bit younger too, and it's fresh. So just kind of in that weird space of figuring things out and finding out how we move forward. Sam and I, he just lives down the street, so we still catch up daily for gym and stuff. But yeah, we had a very good 6 years together, and we still continue to obviously move forward as good mates and in the adult space too.
I mean, that's a rarity that you see going from still being exes and maintaining an amicable relationship enough to not let it affect the business.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
I was like, you don't hear that too often. If anything, it's usually the opposite. Once you become exes, it's like fire and ice, oil and gas,
yeah.
oil and water.
Well, yeah, I mean, we didn't break up in terms of because we hated each other or anything bad happened. I think we just sort of went into that friend zone, particularly through our work in OnlyFans. We've done over 500 scenes together. So a lot of our content it started off together. We brought our mates in. We then have worked overseas, a lot of threesomes together. and stuff like that. So I guess maybe that was a contributing factor where suddenly that breakdown from the sex side did contribute to us starting to be more cohabitants rather than partners. But we work extremely well as business partners. We know each other very intimately, and we've obviously built a brand together. So we continue to push that, and it's beneficial for both of us.
I mean, when you find a formula that works, it's silly to stray away from it, especially as a creator, which I would say you are doing OnlyFans. I was like, you create art.
Look, some people would say it's porn, some people will say it's art. I'll leave that up to them.
Listen, tomato. Porn is art. You know, if you are putting your thought into it, it's art. That's how I feel.
I guess for me, like the content that I do on OnlyFans, work with people I want to work with, or I'm setting up scenarios that I find hot or reflect my sexual experiences from younger. Perhaps like one thing that I love is cruising or beats, which is outdoor sex. And so I try to weave that into my content. So you could probably argue there is some element of art. Maybe there's some repressed trauma that I'm exploring through it too. Who knows? But it's definitely porn at the end of the day.
Listen, that bit of trauma, the bit of realism, that's what obviously brings the relatability to your page, and that's why everybody invests in it, or at least 80% of people invest in it. Doesn't help that to be genetically blessed as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, just kind of really started off as a bit of fun for us, a bit of a side hustle. And I guess we just put ourselves out there. We really, we're not like in the States where you have these really big creators and they have a full, like polished brand. We kind of just were two boys from the bush capital in Australia, Canberra at the time. And yeah, I guess it just resonated for people because we're unique on the scene when we started. There wasn't many Australians doing OnlyFans, especially in the gay space.
How long have you been doing OnlyFans? Because there's definitely been an evolution, even though it's still a fairly new, it's changed so much since
I guess
2020.
Yeah, this is 2020 was when we started. It's our 5th year now. When we started, it was sort of in the mainstream, but more as a joke. You hadn't quite had the Bonnie Blues and the Andy Knights and the Andy Lees just yet taking over where they are now. Andy Lee, I don't know if you know him, he's a British creator. He's just released a book, Gay for Pay. Smelly Kid is his book. He was actually my first international collab back in London in 2021. So, I've sort of been around these creators for a while now, but I guess the way we got into it was COVID, lockdowns in Australia, we had time. I'd started hearing of this thing of OnlyFans. We jumped online, saw how amateur it was. People were making money. There wasn't many Aussies on there at the time, so I thought, well, we could put a camera in our room and start filming. So we did, and it kind of just grew from there.
Talk about making a lane and just powering through it. You're right, because so much of the space, especially early on, I feel like it was very heterocentric, very just like you only saw women on there. Even today, I feel like you rarely hear about a lot of successful or bigger male-dominated pages or spaces.
Yeah.
Yet you've been able to sustain for going on. It's crazy to say a half a decade, but we're going on 5 years of pretty much.
Yeah. It's interesting, I think, because, I guess it kind of ties into the whole thing around sexuality and women and men. Number one, I'm gay, so my market share is always going to be smaller than the straight market share.
Mm-hmm.
It's what, like 10% of the population compared to 90%, and then when you divide it in half, it's like 5.45. But yeah, I think women have always been much more in control of their sexuality than men, in my experience. You're a guy, we get horny, we get impulsive, we want to get off. We do it in the moment, and sometimes we regret it, and we haven't really thought it through until that clarity comes through. I'm guilty of it. I'm sure you're guilty of it.
100%.
But I think, women are taught from a young age that sex is something that they can control and they can have power and they can use for men to get their way. And, so when you're taught that, you become aware of your sexuality. And so I think women are actually much more in control of their sexuality because they have much more awareness of how to use it. They're not as impulsive. They can use it and calculate and be more controlling with it. in themselves and use it to control men who are impulsive. OnlyFans is obviously going to attract a bigger female base because then they can play on the psyche of the straight men who are, expecting to go on and pay and have that sort of relationship because they're not thinking it through. They're impulsive. They want to get off on the moment. It's easily accessible on their phones. They jump on, they get off, they spend their cash, and then they disappear. So definitely, I think that when you look at the biggest creators that are women, and they're very smart women as well. They're not just sex workers. They're like very clever business women. So like making multi-million dollars, so.
Yeah, I mean, they're for both men and women, just anybody really who is in the adult entertainment space. There's a lot of judgment, a lot of criticism that goes around. But I think that's the aspect that a lot of those people are missing is, I mean, they may be, expressing or, getting really intimate, but they also have control over that level. But I think it goes to show that not only can they regulate their emotions, but they can also be shrewd and crafty business people as well to be able to
100%.
make this happen.
Yeah, and it's very different. I think that gay men actually have it a lot easier than straight men in the OnlyFans adult content space. I think straight men, face a lot harsher criticism, from women and other men as well, and actually struggle a lot more, I think, as creators than what straight women do, or even gay men. And case in point is, like a lot of straight men actually end up doing gay for pay on OnlyFans, like Andy Lee and his crew, because it's the gay boys that will pay the money to see men. Women are not jumping onto those platforms to pay straight men for sex content, for porn. Women just don't consume porn like men. So for straight guys, it's actually a lot harder, I think, for them to generate income. One of the ways that they do it, there's a successful Aussie creator who's straight, Primal Instinct, or Dale Egan. He's on the Gold Coast. He's sort of the nexus point. So men will subscribe to his page. So men are subscribing to a straight man's page. But that's because he just works with and has a rotation of all the female creators coming through. So rather than straight guys subscribing to all the individual female creators, they'll just go with the one dude who's getting the cycle through so they can see their favorite creators come through when they do. So that's one way that he's able to have cornered that market, but that's very rare to be able to have that pool, of constant flow of big female creators coming through. So yeah, I do feel for the straight guy creators because they either have to kind of go down the gay for pay route or they can struggle a bit.
I mean, that in itself is a huge decision for anybody in this space. Sex work is all about principle. In a sense, what are you comfortable with? What are you not comfortable with? And not everybody can, makes that call to be like, hey, I can do gay for pay. Or in the case that, not everybody who is out. So it raises a whole lot of questions internally, I feel like, as well. What 100%. Are some of, sorry, go ahead.
No, I agree with you, yes.
Yeah, like are there like some stereotypes that as an outsider not in the space, in the performative space, we're not privy to that you think you've come across over the years?
Yeah, I'd probably say that, like sexuality is probably more fluid in men than what society gives us credit for. I guess we assume women are the queens of sexual fluidity. Like it's very accepted that women can be bi or lesbian, like when there's always that kind of notion that two girls kissing, is acceptable and they'll do it in college and they explore or whatever. But actually men are right there too. They're just very repressed about it. The truth is that a lot of guys are curious or flexible, and especially after a few beers or a divorce, I reckon, like women get celebrated for fluidity, but I think men actually get shamed for it on both sides. Like you can, a lot of guys appreciate the bro job, but it's still kind of taboo to talk about. Whereas, like if a woman pashes another woman or they kind of get each other off or whatever, and they talk about it, it's kind of celebrated, and all the guys are kind of interested.
Right.
So yeah, I think like closet curiosity, it kind of turns into action, I guess, when the safe space exists. And for me, I see that a lot because I'm on the other other end where I actually do have straight guys, or married guys or guys on the demo reaching out to me all the time.
So, hey, I've never heard of the bro job before. So I was like, that took me a little second to put one and one together. But I was like, you know what? I was literally just talking about to one of my friends about this. Is uh, I don't know if you ever see this type of content all over your like For You pages or anything, but there's so many points. I'm going to start with this, and then it's going to segue back to what you were talking about, like the concept of homie head. Or I was like what's a few what's a little bit of messing around between friends? Like if we're really friends, it shouldn't mess anything up. Every time I see a post like that, it is always a woman saying that, but a guy could never make that same post and it be like celebrated or like people hop on the bandwagon because of like what you're saying. Like women get a lot more free leeway when it comes to sexuality or owning their bodies and everything like that. But I was like, if you look back at, let's talk about the Greeks. I was like, the Greeks were freaks for real.
Yeah.
They didn't care if it was guy on guy, girl on girl, girl on guy, a whole plethora of people, together. They just thought pleasure was pleasure, and there was different levels of love, and there was nothing wrong with that. But somewhere along the way, we kind of got all judgmental about it.
Yeah, I think too for men, because we are, impulsive and horny, we can have sex as an outlet and it not be an emotional ride or attachment. And in particular, a lot of straight men see gay sex as an outlet, not necessarily as a sexual identity. Like I've kind of had long-term hookups with married guys. Sam and I used to have a glory hole. And, the married straight guys would come around and they didn't see it as gay. They just saw it as a release, and they'd go back to their wives or kids. Good night. They kind of live two lives because I guess they haven't really got the room to live one, like to basically live one honest life. For them, like they would come around and have this release. It was very transactional. It was just a physical release. And it wasn't necessarily cheating because I'm not a girl. It's not like they're cheating on their wife with another girl and having this relationship or whatever. It's purely they were just coming over maybe once a week. It was physical for them. They couldn't explore it at home, so they'd go somewhere safe that was anonymous for them. And it wasn't about being gay. It was literally just about feeling that emotional, physical feeling in the time and going home. And the amount of guys who were identified as straight that come through. There's actually a creator here in Melbourne called Melbourne Glory Hole, who I've worked with, or Glory Hole Mel, on Twitter. And she's, transitioning at the moment, but majority of her clients that come through and her content, they're all straight identifying men who are coming, to her glory hole. So, and she's transitioning right now. So it doesn't fit the mold of what society says or what the straight guy, wants to go for. Like, so it's very interesting.
Yeah, I could only imagine. I have never really thought too much about the world of sex work or OnlyFans, where some people, it goes back to that discussion that people have been having for years. Like, is porn cheating? Is it not? Is cheating just like emotional? If it is just transactionally like sex or some form of hooking up, is that really cheating? And then there's that extra layer of, I would have never thought that so much of your audience, or the people who you worked with would have been married or straight identifying men. Just, I mean, yeah, we look for release. Like we have the saying, if it's a hole, it's a hole. It doesn't matter.
Any hole's a goal.
But you have all these guys with their bravado and saying like, oh, I could never, like, no, it has to be a woman, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's mainly because there's so much shame that they're afraid to be like, yeah, a hole is a hole, or like, I'm attracted to all holes. It doesn't really matter.
Sometimes it's not even about being, as a guy, though, being attracted particularly to something. I mean, like I was in boarding school for a short stint, and I remember in the dorm room, they would have competitions where there was a table in the middle of the room and we would all stand around and one guy would go to the end of the table and jerk off and blow.
Like the biscuit thing?
Well, not quite the biscuit thing, but we would put a little marker on the table to see who could shoot the furthest, And like, So you've got a bunch of dudes standing around, all jerking off, shooting their load on this table, doing mark, which is completely homoerotic, right? But yet it's not gay. It's just, and they're not attracted to each other, but the environment is
Hmm.
horny enough for them to kind of get off and just have this release. And then they just, go back to doing their homework and mealtime and stuff. And it doesn't carry over. It's like, it's just a funny thing that they do. So I think, for men, like I was saying, I think we are actually a lot more sexually fluid than what society gives us credit for. But we kind of have to wrap it up in this package of masculine broness, this fraternity thing for it to not be gay. It doesn't question what our masculinity is because it's not gay. It's just hanging with the boys, kind
That is a really interesting take that I don't think I've heard anybody ever pose before. We all remember, all the bachelors, all the fellows listening, we remember what it's like to be like that 12 to 16 year age where that's the only thing that was on our mind is just like getting a nut. It was like we didn't care when, where, how. Like a nut was a nut. As we go older, those urges never go away, especially when you're in isolated circumstances like a boarding school or penitentiary or maybe like the military or something like that. It's like you have the needs, you have the urges. What are you gonna do? Um, but I love that you've brought up the point that it's not always sexual or sensual. Sometimes there's it's just primal, it's just natural, and it could be platonic. Like it doesn't have to be so much deeper. Sometimes we make
of.
it too deep, I guess.
Yeah, and I think, and it doesn't matter if you're kind of like sitting there with like, I mean, another guy or, like a trans person or a girl. Sometimes, like, if you're horny enough and your inhibitions are down, you just kind of go ahead with it. I mean, the amount of times I've been in rooms where there's like, footy players and they're snorting coke, watching porn, and they're all naked with their dicks out, jerking off together like as teammates, kind of thing. And it's not gay, but yet it's completely like sexually aroused or whatever. So, but I think like what it does is it just kind of goes to show that like as you said, like as we get older, those urges don't go away. But what starts to happen is we become more aware of society's expectations of us and what it means to be a man, I guess. It kind of, we start to become aware and think, oh, fuck, if I do this, I'm going to get labeled in a certain way. And then we learn to start to repress those emotions, and it leaves a lot of guys silent and shut off, I think, and confused about who they real may be in reality.
No, I mean that is 100% true. And I guess it also really depends on where you are in life. For the younger audience who might just be finishing secondary school, going into university in situations like that, it's probably a lot deeper of an experience because they're just starting to deal with that societal pressure and they're trying to figure out, or they're trying to like figure out what label they need to belong to, which is something that as you get older is like you realize we don't need labels. Not everything needs or deserves a label.
Yeah, and I think like I mean I have some interesting insight because I get a lot of DMs from younger guys like 19, 20-year olds and that who say, I'm gay but I'm not gay. And what they mean is that, they're kind of like attracted to men, but they don't really identify with the glittery camp or the queer image that society kind of still assigns to gay men.
Hmm.
And so they're kind of like looking for masculine role models who reflect their reality. And so, I'm gay, but I'm not gay is a common DM
Right.
because I'm what, like, for me, like I just am who I am. And I'm quite, and I guess presenting, I'm straight, what they call straight passing, where I walk down the street and that people aren't automatically going to assume like I'm a poof or I'm gay or whatever. Whereas for some people who really carry that card on their sleeve, you instantly recognize where they're going. But, so I think like a lot of young men don't actually see themselves portrayed in the media or represented enough online. And so they have this disconnect because they're not really relating to the queer community, but then they know that they're not fully straight as well. So yeah, they're kind of craving this masculine representation, and then they're looking up to creators like me who are just kind of putting themselves out there, and I guess they're kind of maybe trying to see guidance or just see that, hey, it's not just me. There is someone that I can relate to, and I don't have to lose my identity to be interested in men, because I think, I myself, when I was growing up in high school, I didn't have an iPhone. I didn't have social media. I'm nearly 40, so it's going back 20, 25 years. So for me, I didn't have representation except for what I consumed in the media, and I didn't see myself in anything that was queer, and stuff that was queer was very rare. So when I did come out, when I moved to Melbourne in my early 20s, the only place for me to go was gay bars. And I thought, in order to kind of, masculinity was kind of seen as toxic in those spaces. So for me, I kind of, had to kind of lose a little bit of my identity and embrace that queerness in order to be accepted in those spaces. I don't think that is the case today.
And which we're very, very happy for, because everybody can kind of relate to that, where we feel like we have to diminish ourselves or put on some type of facade to belong to a certain group or to belong in a certain place. And that's really big when it's a huge part of our identity, such as our sexuality or our race, our intelligence level. Those things that we can hide, but we don't have control over. I'm glad that we have moved to a more progressive space where, like I said, gay used to just mean everybody automatically thought like hyper feminine, or these quirky, the shrill voice. But now it has such a wide berth of different layers and looks and sounds about it. So I love that. Do you have any advice for younger guys who are like you were 20 years ago in a new city, just coming out or just getting comfortable in your identity and trying to find your voice or make a way?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's always going to come down to your personal circumstances as well. Not everyone is in an environment that can support them coming out. Some people have to make a really big decision between coming out and losing their family. I know people have lost their family because of cultural or religious backgrounds and reasons, kind of thing. you know. But quite often, a lot of people, and what I did too, is I did move cities to come out comfortably. And my biggest advice would be that if you are planning to come out to your family and you're not quite sure how they would react, I would say become independent first before you do that. Don't come out at home and then be left vulnerable. Maybe move out, become independent, and then approach it. But as for someone who is, finding their feet and stuff and maybe exploring, like the community, I think you've got to, one of the key things is to really just take your time and do what feels right for you. I think it's really important to not feel like you're getting pressured by other people to go down a certain path or to come out a certain way or to do the thing. There's nothing wrong with maybe taking 10 years to come out because, like for some people, trying to explore your identity, trying to explore what your sexual, like where you lean or whatever. So, it's very fluid. It can change over time as well. It's not always fixed. And so just making sure that you're being true to yourself and that you're not starting to cover up traits or like change your personality or put on a facade, because, repressing those sorts of things can lead to issues later on in life. I think the more authentic you can be, the more that you can just be like, actually, no, this is my process, respect it. That would be the greatest advice I would give, is not to let other people pressure you into how you want to approach your exploration.
I mean, that's massive. I hope that anybody who's listening who needed that message got it.
Yeah.
Because that's
Well,
a tough conversation that a lot of people spend most of their life, dealing with.
Yeah, and I mean, I say that because my first boyfriend, I think my first relationship did pressure me, provided a lot of external pressure to kind of come out and do things. And I wasn't comfortable, but I went along with it because he was older, I was younger, and I just trusted him. Unfortunately for me, it didn't quite work out. But, you know, in hindsight now, I'm very aware that, you know, the effects that can have. So for anyone who does ask me, you know, how should I come out? I say, you've got to come out for you, not for anybody else. If you're coming out for somebody else, it's completely the wrong reasons. You have to do it for you.
And I'm backing that statement. Like, it really does have to be for you. One of the biggest points we talked about last year was being your own main character. As the main character, you kind of get to lead the story. If you feel like you're not ready for it, you don't have to come out.
And you may never be ready for it, you know.
Yeah.
But hopefully, you know, hopefully you can find someone that you can relate to, such as me or somebody else online. That, you know, when you do, that's why representation is so important. And not just, I'm not just talking about gay men. I mean, I'm talking about representation in all of life. If you can see somebody that you relate to, and you can see them being successful, you can see them being authentic, and you can see them being honest, you know, that gives you the courage to be like, actually, you know what, I feel centered in myself, and yeah, you know, if I can see myself in them, I know I'm going to be okay. It's when that representation is lacking, you know, that people then become cut off or isolated or feel like they don't belong.
Yeah. One of my favorite segments that we do in the show, it's called the Quickie Questions, because who doesn't love a good quickie? And I mean, if anybody knows about a quickie,
I do.
I feel like it's you know. So we're gonna hop into this. We're just gonna rapid fire this. All right.
I hope I don't shoot my leg too early.
Listen, this is the one time you can't be premature. We'll start off with something saucy but easy. In your opinion, what has been one of the wildest OnlyFans requests that you've gotten?
One of the wildest? God, there's so many. So I've got like an actual list in my notes of the weirdest shit that ever. But one of the wildest is probably just like non-sexual things, actually. Everyday objects like balloons or bananas or fruit, stuff like that. Just people getting off to these weird things that I wouldn't even associate anything to do with sex.
I'm never trying to yuck anybody's yum, but I can only imagine the random objects that people get into.
Look, some people are into weird shit.
Dude, yeah. I used to work in an emergency room, and some of the sexual shit that people came in with, and I was like, how did you even get this? You know, never mind. I was like, I don't want to know. I need to know.
Yeah, definitely popping balloons though. And it kind of left me scarred because the whole intensity in it is the balloon popping. And it started to scare me by the end of it because I'm like, on the fifth balloon popping, I don't know when it's going to pop. So I think I've got a bit of PTSD now around balloons.
Anytime you see a balloon now, you're just like, oh shit. What was the first scene where you put it out and you realize like, holy shit, like I might be able to do this, like it's more than a hobby?
Yeah, well, I would probably say my first go there with Andy Lee and Big Liam in London, because before that, we really were just shooting in our bedrooms at home or lounge room or our local area, so it was very safe. The first time when we went to London, and Andy was still a big creator at that time too, and said, yep, came to us, we shot in the hotel. I was like, holy fuck, you know, we could do this.
No, I mean, that's always a big thing for me. And like people ask me, how would you know when you made it? Or now that you've made it, like, what do you think? And I was like, have I made it? Like, is this it? Because I never know if it's when you land like a big guest or somebody well-known in a space, is that making it? Or when somebody recognizes you, like that success metric is just unreal sometimes. So it took me probably about a year and a half of doing the show before like when I noticed people actually started like DMing me or recognizing my like face places. They're like, you do that podcast thing, or you're like the dumpster fire guy. And I was like, yeah, that's me. I was like, am I successful? I don't know. It's just crazy.
It is a weird question because, you know, now I'll walk into a bar in Barcelona and people will recognize me. Never been there before. I'll walk into a bar in LA, people will recognize me. So I guess in a way to other people, yeah, you've made it. But to me, I still feel like I'm just, you know,
exactly.
the guy from Australia.
No, I feel that. I was like, I'm just an average Joe. So when people like come up to me or like recognize me, I was like,
yeah.
Me? Or I had that moment living in Nashville. Like we get a lot of musicians and stuff, and so I try to be respectful and like not fanboy out, so to speak. But I'm just like, hey, is it cool? I'm just gonna just acknowledge you, be chill about it, and
See,
just keep it
I
mushy.
always in my back of my mind, there's always people bigger than me. So
Exactly.
I'm never at the top. I've always think there's someone bigger, but you slowly climb up that ladder and you don't recognize it. But all of a sudden, you're at the point where someone below you is thinking they're bigger than me.
Yeah,
You're like, oh,
it's crazy. Okay, I think this is a good one. What instantly makes someone sexy to you? Because
for
we deal a
me,
lot with attraction, you know, sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's emotional, sometimes you don't even know why you're attracted to a person, you just are.
yeah, look, it's actually got nothing to do with their look. For me, it's about swagger. A guy could be, you could have like, Stranger Things, Harper, kind of dad bod, middle aged, kind of wrecked soul.
Yeah,
He's got swagger though. So if he walked up to me and was like, boy, get down, I would just melt no matter what he was like. So for me it's about that confidence, that swagger, just like knowing exactly what they want and you pick it up straight away. And to me that's what sexiness is that swagger and confidence.
I definitely have said confidence is a superpower. It really can elevate your game leaps and bounds.
But yeah,
As somebody who doesn't consider themselves to be like a 10 or anything, I was like, I do pretty well, and I think it's because I back myself.
I
I was
actually
like,
find the more attractive someone is, the less attracted I am to them. The more like, so when I say like the more prettier, the closer to a 10 in
mhm.
terms of looks, I find that I'm actually not as attracted. So, because they lack that swagger.
Yeah,
Because they know
dude,
they're hot. But there's a difference between knowing you're hot and being confident. So,
yes, I agree. I agree. I agree. If you weren't doing this right now, what do you think you would be doing? Or do you think, a better question, now that you've done this for so long, do you think that you would ever leave this space, or do you think as long as you're working that you would probably still stay around this space in some capacity?
I mean, look, I kind of feel like, it is a bit of a finite industry because there is a limitation when it comes to age and performance of what you can do. But at the same time, my perceptions of that have also changed because I found that the older I've gotten, the more attraction I've gotten from younger guys,
Mhm.
actually, that are looking for a daddy type, because they all have daddy issues around that age.
I mean, everybody loves a good MILF DILF. I mean, that's why it was so popular for so long. It's the tried and true that I don't think is ever going to go anywhere.
As I've moved through my age groups, like in my 20s to my 30s to my 40s, they're like, what the pool of people who are attracted to me has changed radically. And who I've been attracted to has changed as well. So, like, I don't really foresee me doing this forever. But I've got the library, I've got the content, and I'll always run it. I'll just play it out for as long as I can, as long as I keep enjoying it and having fun and being able to pull the people that I want to work with. I'll go for it. But I don't really, I'm not afraid to step away from it either. I've been doing it 5 years. I might do it for another five more, and who knows.
I always say there's what I plan and there's reality. Like you never really know when it's time to call it a day if you do, or if that time ever comes until it happens. Last question I got for you,
Okay. I'm
and
still
then
holding
and then
on.
my
So,
brothers will wrap. If your career had a theme song, what would it be?
see, this is me because I'm terrible with music, but I would probably choose Dancing on My Own by Robin.
You know, that's not the song that I thought was going to come out of your mouth.
I think
But
it sums
honestly,
up my
I was like,
psychological state quite well. And
honestly, I was like, I don't
relationships. So,
care how masculine that song's a bop. Okay, every guy secretly
going to be my
or
funeral
publicly,
song.
when
So.
it comes on, they're definitely like they're banging it out in their heads. You know, they're just like I'm in the corner watching you. No, like yeah, like we're getting down to it. It's been so much fun talking to you. Thank you for making the time today. Before we get on out of here, what
My
does the rest
pleasure.
of 2025 look like for you? Where can we find you?
Yeah, hectic
Let
year.
us
I
know.
mean, like, I always never know what's coming up, but then I do. You can find me on Instagram. It's my main platform, Kobe Fawkes, KOBYFALKS. And you can just hit the link in bio on my profile there. You'll find all the other links that you want. Yeah, this year, like, quite a bit of travel coming up. Looking at getting some more tattoos on my chest. I just got this one on my arm recently in Thailand last year, so I'm gonna head back there, get my pets done. Some content in the UK. I'm actually going to be in your neighborhood, Nashville, in November. So around fall, Halloween, to check it out. I've got mates there that will do some content with as well. So yeah, lots of kind of plans and trips, which keeps me looking forward. Gets me through the winter here because we're the opposite to you guys.
I love a schedule that's not overpacked, just a couple big things we want to do. If you've made it this far and you want to see me and Kobe do some in real life stuff, I mean, if he's going to be in Nashville, we got to. I need at least 100 likes for us to do a meet and greet. Maybe I'll take you to my
bro job. Who knows?
the first bro job inside the Bachelor Pad.
Suddenly there's 5,000 likes. Oh man, you got it.
You definitely need to go ahead and hit that like button and share it so everybody else can too. No, guys, thank you for making it to another episode. 500 likes in November. You'll see me and Kobe face to face doing something wild. Who knows? Maybe I'll take him to my favorite tattoo parlor. We'll get him his first pair of boots and we'll boot scoot and boogie. I don't know.
Or a cowboy hat, maybe. I've always wanted one. We have a Kubras here. We don't have cowboy hats.
That's actually the biggest misconception. Nashville, nobody here wears cowboy hats.
Oh, no? Okay, a belt buckle. I don't care.
I was like, we'll do a buckle, we'll do boots, but I was like, we never wear the hats. I will see all you amazing bachelors and bachelorettes next week for another episode. Peace.